Morning, everybody. Rath here with the DFS Minute for May 22nd, 2015 here on rotocurve.com. You can find me at Twitter at FantasyWrath. And we're going to hit you up today with some pitching in the Friday night slate for daily fantasy baseball. Talk about why you might want to increase your play this weekend and reasons about why that would be something you can do, and kind of some trends in the industry. And then we're going to hit you up with a Fangraphs screen share, talk about how to analyze team hitting and pitching from a perspective of, the last 30 days and how that's important. Let's get into it. Let's talk about why you potentially might want to play more over the next 3 or 4 days. If you are around, if you have availability of playing, doing research, then be aware that this is a heavy travel weekend, obviously with Memorial Day. And a lot of people are gone, so that means they don't have the ability to play daily fantasy baseball. But the sites are still putting up contests, and they may not adjust their inventory. And they've already got that inventory pretty much locked in, so there's not a lot of wiggle room. So, especially when we talk about the qualifier events. So just be aware that there could be potential overlay starting tonight in some of these qualifiers. I don't mean, don't go crazy. But if you're somebody who's never really taken a shot at a qualifier before, or maybe you only play small stakes, you want to step up a little bit, just be aware there could be a lot of value tonight and over the next few days. So definitely take advantage of it. It's something that you're probably going to see moving forward. Typically, as somebody who's worked behind the scenes in the operations for daily fantasy sites, I can tell you that there's a couple of checkpoints, and one of them is Memorial Day. Once Memorial Day hits, you start to see a dip in daily fantasy baseball volume. The other one is July 4th. And so definitely be aware of some of these live event qualifiers or bigger event qualifiers, that it might now be the opportunity where this presents a buying opportunity and where you can get good value on your dollar and good overlay. So just be aware, keep aware of that. Definitely something I'm going to be keeping an eye on over the next few days. And if I can, get a shot at some qualifiers and I get good value, then I'm definitely going to take my chances. Let's talk about pitching for today. There's a ton of teams, obviously 30 teams out there, and there's a lot of good pitching. And we almost wish that the pitching wealth was probably spread out a little bit better. But we have a heavy pitchers today. I'm not going to hit on every pitcher. Josh and Benny are going to do that from 12 to 1 today on the Curve Show. I'm only going to hit you with a couple of guys I think are the best cash game options today, the best 50-50 heads ups, and then 2 guys I think you can also use in those contests, but also have strikeout potential upside where they're also tournament plays for me and make good tournament plays. I'll give you one value play where I think everything is kind of lined up for this guy today, and it is in a good spot. So the 2 guys at the top of the board, very obvious to me anyway. Max Scherzer, a -290 favorite at this point at home against Philadelphia, against Sean O'Sullivan, with a run total of 7. So huge disparity there, huge run differential in this game today. And obviously I expect Scherzer to go deep and the Nationals to crush O'Sullivan. So he's 12-7 on DraftKings. So you paying up. He's got to give you a minimum of 25, and I'm saying minimum 25, and that's not even giving you value. I think that's like breaking even. That's like a 2x. It's good that you can bank those points, because I think like anything less than the 20 today, it's like impossible. But he's really got to get to 30 in order for you're looking for about like 2.4, 2.5 multiplier on DraftKings for your pitching. So 2.5, he's got to get to 30. So that's tough, asking pitchers to get to 30. I mean, he can do it, but the Phillies don't strike out a ton. They just can't hit their, so he might go really deep in a game. The thing you got to hope for with Scherzer, you got to hope that, if he can go 9, a lot of times they're not going to let him go 9, but if he can go 9, somehow get a complete win, a complete game win and shutout bonus, that's going to make up for the fact that maybe he doesn't have that monster strikeout game today, only because the Phillies just don't strike out very much. But again, it is the Phillies, so you definitely can't fade Scherzer just because the Phillies don't strike out. Greinke is Zach Greinke priced at $10,400 on DraftKings. He's at home against San Diego against Cashner. Run total is 6.5. He's a 175 favorite. So I actually think that he might be a little bit underpriced today. As much as a 175 favorite is, I think that value, I think that number might be low. If you just compare it to the, I know the Phillies stink and Scherzer's minus basically 290, but the Padres have not been, the Padres have a lot of names in that lineup, but they aren't really hitting as well as they were at the beginning of the season. So I definitely like Greinke here. Doesn't have the huge K upside, but he's got such a great floor today that if he can get you the 20 to 25 that you need to bank for your pitcher, I think that he's pretty much a lock to do that. The two other guys that have some K potential upside, especially in tournaments, Carlos Carrasco is at 8,800 on DraftKings. He's minus 150 favorite with a 7.5 run total against Mike Leake. And Michael Pineda is 9,200 on DraftKings. He's a minus 180 favorite, 7.5 run total against Kobe Lewis in Texas. So I love getting pitchers at home. I love getting favorites minus 150 or greater, and I love getting run totals 7.5 or less. So those are all things that I'm looking for when we start talking about the pitching matrix and the charts and everything that we look at. Everything adds up for both these guys today. I don't see any particular reason why you should be away from them, and I think that they give you that price break that you can use Greinke with either one of these guys. I don't know if you can use Max. I think you can use Max with Carrasco and just be a little bit over the 20,000. You'd be around 21.5-ish, 25. That's still a little bit more than what I want to spend on pitching, but I feel very comfortable going with Greinke and going with Carrasco or Pineda in 50-50s and heads-ups and rolling those guys out there and banking 20, 25 points on each side. Now, as far as value goes, I think there's one guy that really stands out for me, and it's not Alfredo Simon, who a lot of people are probably going to be touting today because he is going against Houston. They strike out the most, and he's so cheap. He's 5,500 on DraftKings. But the guy that I'm looking at is Ubaldo Jimenez at 7,000 on DraftKings. He's at Miami. So I love getting that park bump where he goes to the National League. He doesn't face the DH. He gets the pitcher. And the Marlins are the #1 team in ground ball rate over the last 30 days. They have a 51% plus ground ball rate. And Ubaldo is an elite ground ball pitcher this year. It's really transformed. And he's been solid. Other than the one bad outing, this guy has given you value every step of the way. So can Ubaldo at 7K get you a 3X in a tournament? Yes, I think he can. 3X is basically what you're looking for. Is what that means is I'm getting 21 points for 7K worth of salary, which is 21 divided by 7 is 3. I think he can get you a 3X today, and he might even be able to get you more depending on how many innings he goes. But I think that he's a big shot here for a 20-point game, and with a potential of even maybe a 25-point game. So I really like Ubaldo in this spot, and he's an elite ground ball pitcher at this point. And the Marlins just don't get the ball in the air, And if he can avoid a Stanton bomb, then he should be okay. And the Orioles are going against Henderson Alvarez, who got bombed his last time out. And I think the Orioles should be able to put up some runs today, give Ubaldo the run support that he needs, and just go out there and pitch to contact, get a bunch of outs, and go deep in the game and give up no runs. So I do like Ubaldo in this spot. And as the day goes on, we do more research. That might change. But for right now, I think that Ubaldo is a really live play today. Two guys I don't like today, Lance Lynn at Kansas City and John Lester at Arizona. Don't like the National League pitcher going to the American League ballpark. Even though KC is a pitcher's park, he gets the DH, and he gets a team that makes a lot of contact. They don't strike out, and they don't walk, but they make a lot of contact. They don't hit for a lot of power, but the Royals have done damage to a lot of pitchers this year that have been good. So stay away from KC. Also, John Lester going into Arizona, not a good environment for left-handed pitchers going against that heavy right-handed power D-backs lineup. So as much as Lester's been pitching well, I'm staying away from Lester. He would only be a guy that you would consider if you have multiple entry. Maybe you're shooting at one of these live final qualifiers and you figure, hey, no one is going to be on John Lester, and he still has potential going out there and putting up a big game. But as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't go anywhere near Lester unless it's a situation where you want to roll Lester out there with Max or Greinke or Carrasco or somebody like that, only because no one's going to be on Lester today, and it's in a tournament only where you have multiple entry. So that's my only recommendation there. Let's hop over to Fangraphs before we close out today and see if we can fire this up. And here's what we got. So we go over to Fangraphs, and we're going to go into the leaders section. And I like to go into batting and team. And instead of looking at lefty righty, which is what we normally do, let's go last 30 days. Now, with the last 30 days, you are not able to do splits. And I wouldn't want to anyway because the sample sizes are going to be too small. So here's what I'm looking at. This is your dashboard with all 30 teams and your statistics. If you want to change the statistics, you can come down here and you can change them. So what I do is I'm not worried about numbers. I want ratios. So we got games, at-bats, plate appearances, walk rate, K rate, ISO, which is isolated power, weighted on base, and weighted runs created. Let's see if there's any other measures that we want to throw in here. I usually like to look at some other things here. We got, let's see what else I got. A lot of pitch FX stuff. And let's just roll with this. Make it simple. All right. So we're getting the last 30 days team batting. Okay. And then what we do is let's take a look at strikeout rates. Cubs and Astros, big shock, right? Cubs are number 1. Astros are number 2. Brewers are number 3. Rockies number 4. Mets, Padres starting to get in there. Let's look at the teams that we don't want to go against. Royals, Indians, Braves, Red Sox, Athletics, Phillies. Talked about the Phillies and Scherzer. These are teams that don't strike out. Look at the team that walks the most as well. The Indians don't strike out and they draw a ton of walks. The Dodgers don't strike out, they draw a ton of walks. The other thing that I look at is isolation power. It's more like a slugging percentage number, but it really locks in on power. So if you see here, look at the Astros. While the Astros are high in strikeout, they're also the number 1 team in isolated power, which gives that boom or bust effect. They're a team that can go out there and strike out a ton and hit a ton of home runs. So what I would look for is who are the teams with the worst isolated power, with the highest strikeout rates. So let's try to get somebody like, look here at the Mets, 22% strikeout rate, 128 ISO. Padres, 22% strikeout rate, 129 ISO. And then you go over here to the weighted on base, and then the runs created plus, which is just for the park. And you can see here that you really want to pick on the Mets and the Padres right now. And that's why I mentioned Greinke as being the best cash game play today because of the price and the position, because the Padres aren't really walking a ton. They're striking out a lot now, the last 30 days. And they're not hitting for power, and they're not getting on base, and they're not scoring runs. So to me, that's why I like Greinke. Now the Phillies, on the other hand, look at their isolated power. They're weak across the board, but the strikeout number is 17 versus 22. So even though Greinke doesn't strike out as many guys, he kind of evens out with Scherzer because the Phillies don't strike out as much. So that's why, if for me, they're equal matchups, and then the price differential to me is the number 1 factor. So the White Sox are the worst team over the last 30 days with isolated power. So what that means is they just don't do a lot of damage. So if you have like a underpriced pitcher, like I like Salazar yesterday because Salazar has K upside, and I knew that the White Sox weren't going to be able to score, and they were going against Danks, and Danks is horrible, and I knew the right-handed bats for the Indians were going to put up runs. So that's why Salazar kind of jumped to the number 1 pitcher on the board for me yesterday. So when you look down here, you want to avoid teams that don't strike out and have isolated. So like the Dodgers, the Indians right now, you do not want to go near the Indians. They're walking at a high rate. They're not striking out. They're hitting for power. They're getting on base. Like the Indians right now are a team I'm staying away from. Weighted on base, we know that it's a good measure as well. And right now, you'll see the #1 team for weighted on base over the last 30 days is Bryce Harper. I mean, well, it's the Nationals, and it's heavily weighted for Bryce Harper. So you see here, the Giants have really stepped up. Now that they have Hunter Pence back, the Giants are a team that's starting to hit. Now, they don't hit for a ton of power, you see here with the ISO, but they get on base, and they don't strike out. So they're a team that you want to avoid. Look at the Twins. Twins roughed up Liriano the other day. I felt that. You know, the Twins are starting to hit. Look at the weighted runs. Typically, your weighted on base and your weighted runs are going to correlate. You're not going to have a high number here and a low number here. So you go down here and you start looking at who are the worst. You know, look at the Padres. Padres right now, man, with all those bats, with the Kemp and the Upton, the Will Myers who's out, this is not a very good hitting team right now. They're not hitting. They're striking out. They're not drawing walks, not hitting for power. They're not getting on base. So to me, you can pick on the Padres, Angels, Mets, White Sox. Look at the Red Sox. Red Sox are not hitting. The last five, bottom five, weighted on base, runs created. It's got a little bit of pop. You know, they don't strike out a ton. They draw a little bit more rocks, but the Red Sox are not this murderer's row team that they may be perceived to be. So I know a guy like Garrett Richards is pretty popular today. For me, he's a tournament play only, and he's on the road, so that does worry me a little bit because the park is a little bit different. But Garrett Richards would probably be a guy you want to look at in a tournament today for sure, based on some of these numbers. So that's what you can do. You can use this recency data to really get a better feel for what the team is doing, because when you start going over to using season-long data, and we're going here and we're going at righties, you know, data is going to be different. Let's go to advanced. Now, some of the metrics obviously are different, but you know, we can do sorts, and you'll see here the Padres are #2 and weighted on base, and number 22 and weighted on base. But we know that the last 30 days they are not that good, so they're trending in the wrong direction. So that's something that you definitely wanted to take into consideration. You'll see here, like a team like the Twins is at the bottom, but over the last 30 days, they're in the top 6. So that's something that you definitely need to be aware of, is that a team could be trending in a different direction over the last 30 days versus what they did in April. So the recency data for me is very important when looking at this. All right, guys, that's it for today. Hopefully you got a good teaching lesson out of this. We'll hit you back here at 12 noon with Benny and Josh for the curve. And then at the end of the day, around 6:30, once we get everything in for the DFS Minute PM edition, give you some of those value plays and the hitters that we're locked in on. Rath signing off for today. And as we always say here at RotoCurve, stay classy, DFS.